When I was a teenager, I read and I loved the story called The Hobbit by Tolkien. And most of us would know it today in its movie form, along with the trilogy that followed called The Lord of the Rings. But one of my favorite scenes in that story is when the main character, Bilbo Baggins, he decides to leave the quaint confines of his cute little home in the Shire, and he decides to join this company of dwarfs on their epic adventure of going to reclaim their homeland on Lonely Mountain from the fire-breathing dragon Smaug. Now, that's way too much geeky information for you, I know. But wait, there's more to come. And so Bilbo, he gets this contract from the dwarves, and he decides, no, he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to leave. And so they leave the contract with him. And what's interesting is apparently you can get about a 5-foot authentic contract on Amazon and actually read the details of that contract. But essentially what the contract that Bilbo was supposed to sign and join them with, it essentially had 3 things as part of it. First of all, it talked about the fact that he would have he would get about a 1/14th return on investment if they actually had any kind of profits on this journey. Secondly, all of his traveling expenses will be covered. And then thirdly and finally, his funeral expenses would be covered as well if that was actually needed. So after he had sent them away, he wakes up the next morning, and then Bilbo sees that they're gone, and suddenly the confines of his home feel too safe. They feel almost boring, and he feels like he's missed out. And so he signs the contract, and he goes running out of his home, and he goes taking off out of the Shire and past the people and the familiar places that he knows. And one person asks him, "Bilbo, where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going on an adventure." And he has this contract in hand. Some of the things that keep us from the adventure of discipleship that Jesus invites us on are comfort, safety, and familiarity. And those are hard things to leave, and I know that as well as you do. But sometimes God gives us things that are good things, that are gifts that we can embrace and enjoy, and yet subtly and slowly they can become the very things that might limit us from following Jesus in one way or another. They can be internal things like our beliefs or our attitudes or our postures, or they can be external things like decisions that we have to make or other choices that come out in our lives. Jesus said to his disciples, "If any of you wants to be a follower of mine, you need to give up your own way, pick up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it." Following Jesus requires leaving home many times over and leaving the things that are comfortable, safe, and familiar. And these early disciples had to make the same decision. They had to decide, do we trust this Jesus that we're just beginning to know? Do we trust him enough to actually leave all that is safe and familiar and comfortable from our past and to follow him into an unknown future? And this is the question that Jesus has for each one of us as we follow him in discipleship. Jesus asks the same question of us, gives the same invitation to us. Are we willing to leave home? And leaving home to follow Jesus is a decision that we have to make over and over again in our lifetime. To leave things that are comfortable, safe, and familiar. I don't know what leaving home looks like for you. It is there for every one of us, whether you're a new believer and just trying to figure out what it means to follow Jesus, or whether you're somebody who's walked with Jesus for decades. We have to continually make that choice over and over again. I know for me, leaving home has meant a number of different things. At one time in my life, leaving home meant leaving a job that I loved and leaving a paycheck that gave me security. Leaving an area that I lived, that I loved and really enjoyed, and yet I felt like there was this restlessness of God, that God was inviting me and calling me to leave and to step into an unknown future. For me also, leaving home has meant letting go of previous identities, of a previous career in athletics and coaching, and embracing the call to pastoral ministry and trying to figure out what that means and what that looks like. And now for me, being a pastor at a church that I love, Forest Grove Community Church, for the last 20 years, leaving home means something else. And I'm trying to figure out, again, what does that mean for me now? How do you leave home when you're actually don't feel called to leave, but you're actually called to stay? And so leaving home for each one of us requires something different. It requires reflecting on things internally as well as the external choices that we have of anything that it is that is keeping us from following Jesus in this adventure of discipleship. So in what areas of your life is Jesus asking you to continue to follow him and trust him? It might be in areas that are difficult in your life, like maybe it's the loss of a child, or maybe it's a hard right turn, a difficult turn in your career at this point in your life, or maybe it's the loss of a spouse of many decades, Or maybe it's a medical diagnosis that is pretty stark and difficult to absorb. Or maybe it's something that's new and exciting, an opportunity that's in front of you that also has fear involved in it. Maybe you just graduated from high school. Maybe you just recently retired. Maybe your kids just moved out of the house and now you're empty nesters. I don't know what the area is in your life, but there are both internal and external changes that are maybe coming that we have to process and ask again, do we trust Jesus to continue to follow? In what ways is Jesus inviting us to leave home? We all come to many crossroads in our lives where we have to choose a new path because the old path is now gone. Where Jesus is inviting us to pick up our cross, to give up our own way, and to trust and to follow him again. I don't know what that pathway looks like for you. I don't know what that journey will involve. But the invitation for each one of us today is, are we willing to leave home to trust and to follow Jesus? I pray that you'll take up the adventure.